Welcome back, everybody, to San Diego City Firefighters Local 145's podcast. Here today, joined by George Duardo. Very excited to get to the bottom of some of the things that are going on. There's a lot in the headlines. So, George, Mayor's budget came out.
Absolutely.
Give us an overview. You're at the vanguard of making sure that the individuals and men and women of San Diego City Firefighters Local 145 are represented and that we have the resources necessary to do what we do. Looking at the mayor's budget, what are your thoughts? Just a general overview.
Absolutely. And I think the first step in this is having the humility as an organization to do a lot of listening right now. There's a lot of mixed messaging going on, right? Whether the fire department will get a net increase or a decrease in positions. We absolutely know we're going to lose positions to the tune of 11. For us, that is seismic. That is brownouts. We can call it other things, but that's absolutely brownouts. But I didn't come to that conclusion easily. And my point to that is listening to the community, listening to all the speakers that had heartfelt pleas for their particular position in terms of this budget, how it affects them. It's important that we listen to the community, but also come to terms with who we are as firefighters and knowing that a core element of public safety is doing exactly that. It's protecting the public.
Looking at just some of the numbers and things, yeah, 100%. I see that there's questions in some of the comment sections about, hey, well, there's a slated increase to your budget. And I guess as firefighters, we don't know how to do those kinds of mathematics where it's an addition of monies, yet we're losing positions. You know, it's a very challenging thing to wrap your head around. That's for sure.
So just like our households, fuel is getting more expensive. Food is getting more expensive.
Yes.
The fire department historically put a 7% year after year increase for their contracts, whether it's diesel fuel or to keep the lights on in a fire station. Those expenses are real and they are realized each year. So that's why departments need an increase.
And I think something that's important to address is what exactly is it that we're losing? In these proposed cuts, what are the services that the citizens are going to feel the impact of? Now, a whole host of important positions. Let's start off with fire information officer. Whenever there's an incident, generally you would like to have an individual who's sworn, who has done the job, who can sit on the news and explain to everybody in lay terms what's happening. Why do you see all of these apparatus at this incident, this fast-moving brush fire, this third alarm structure fire, and walk everybody through it play by play. And having that expertise on the ground, being able to articulate that to folks, I would say, puts a sense of ease into people to understand, hey, are we in danger? Do we need to go? Or let's keep an eye on this because we have this expert talking to us on the news. And then you've got recruitment and retention officer. As we all know, we discussed it in episode 1, Proposition B decimated our workforce. And we are just now getting caught up barely to where we're at service levels to where people aren't getting mandatory all the time. Not where we need to be as a department in a per capita firefighter to citizen. Not by any means are we closing that gap, but simply filling our fire engines and our fire trucks daily. Recruitment and retention is important because we need an individual to represent what the fire department does, what this life looks like at the colleges, at the high schools, at the job fairs, all of these different places where we can find willing and able participants in this career field. We're going to lose all representation for that as recruitment and retention. And then community resource officer. Those emails, those phone calls come in. Hey, we'd like a fire engine and a crew to come to the elementary school and talk about stop, drop, and roll. Talk about the importance of a plan if there's an emergency at your home. All of these different things. The community resource officer fields all of those requests. Make sure that crews show up for the Boy Scout and Girl Scout meetings. So they have this role model to look up to have plans to show them what to do in case of emergency or just how to be generally good people. Those emails, those phone calls will not be returned. There's nobody to do that work. And then finally, not finally, but the fire academy position where these are the new individuals who need this training, this focused training on a very dangerous and specific job. They are losing part of their cadre, which is a big deal. That is a lot of work down there. You were a post-academy trainer for a long time. George, I mean, you know what that looks like when you're talking about trying to change and mentor new firefighters in a world that they haven't been exposed to yet. And then finally, the bomb squad cuts. The bomb squad cuts are, to your point, essentially a form of brownout, because instead of a dedicated bomb squad that's consistently training and getting ready for those very unique emergencies. Now, I have specific knowledge to this, being a bomb technician, have been for the last 7 years. It is an incredibly focused skill set and something that we practice and train daily, and we're ready to respond at all times to any bomb incident. We also operate the drones for when we need overwatch at a structure fire, vegetation fires, all of those types of incidents. Now you're going to take those individuals who are on the bomb squad and you're going to cycle them back out into operations, because we are all still firefighters. Now, that's all well and good until an emergency comes in. Because as you know, George, you show up to a vegetation fire or a working structure fire, you're committed there probably for multiple hours. Bar none, that is how it goes. So then you get a bomb call that comes in at the airport. Who's going to that? Nobody, right? And the amount of money that you lose if you shut down the airport, I mean, it's extraordinary. So on the flip side to that, a bomb call comes in. Now, I'm the captain at Fire Station 1. It is now my responsibility to call dispatch and say, put engine 1 out of service. We have a bomb response, show X-ray 1, which is our bomb squad designator for our apparatus. Show X-ray 1 responding to Rancho Bernardo for a suspicious package. And we are now going to be committed on that incident for hours. So you've effectively taken the bomb squad and sent them on a response and shut down a fire engine. So to your point, George, how do you see these impacts really being detrimental to not just the personnel in our membership, but the community at large?
Well, and you saw it this weekend, right? This is the second year of significant cuts, right? Even our second helicopter is imperative, not just in weather events, but this weekend is a good example. We had a fire off the 56 that had the potential to threaten structures. And if a water dropping helicopter did not make those drops, and this is the key, in a timely fashion to take the heat out of that fire, it's devastating to a community. You still need the firefighters. I speak to the firefighters that do the hard work to get in there and actually extinguish, right, and overhaul a fire. But the piece of a second helicopter or even a first helicopter to be able to make an initial drop, take the heat out of fire, let fixed wing come in, and let our crews come in and do the hard work of extinguishing and mopping up that fire, that's tried and true. We know that. So without those resources, and you spoke to the bomb squad, so I don't want to repeat that, but we're going to see over and over in this organization how these cuts are going to affect us day in and day out. Just yesterday, I received a call from a community member asking for a age range of 10 to 12-year-olds for a fire engine to go to an event. I was able to give them the resource officer's email and contact information so that they could make that connection. A month from now, that will not happen.
No.
And so those phone calls will not be picked up. And unfortunately, that's an expectation that will not be realized from children who love the fire service. Very simple.
I want to kind of shine some light on something that you brought up, because I know that there are a lot of members of the community who aren't from the fire service who don't understand some of the terms. So mop up and overhaul. Very, very good points. So a lot of people think, hey, the firefighters show up, put the fire out, and then go back to the fire station. No, that's not how it works. Once the flames are actually out, you can have, let's just say, for the sake of making using a round number, 1 acre. You now have to scratch all of the burned material down to mineral soil all the way around this fire. And again, that could be a fire that's 1 acre or 100 acres. And that will end up being an extraordinary amount of committed time to this incident. And now these resources are here. So again, as we dwindle down where our personnel are, as we whittle down and shrink the size of our workforce and people available, this is what we have. We have gaps within coverage because people are committed to overhaul, to mopping up fires to make sure they don't restart after we leave and burn more of the community. So again, any cuts are, as far as we're concerned, they're public safety cuts. And we are just already far too lean to experience any more cuts.
Right. And there's a ratio, right? You brought up the academy, right? There's a ratio of teacher to student. Our academies have grown. So what are we doing, right? Are we now going to have to reduce our academy size because we've lost instructors? Likely, right? That's just one example. Recruitment and retention, right? Not being able to find a diversified workforce is a real concern to this mayor, to the city council. That's going to become a reality for us in terms of a diverse workforce. You name it, we're going to suffer from these cuts.
And as we see more and more cuts, as we see less and less people that are available to respond to these emergencies, we are going to feel those impacts as a workforce.
Right.
Case in point, let's go back to crews committed to incidents. When crews are committed to incidents, what does that mean? That means that the engines or the trucks that aren't on those responses are now covering and making up for all of the coverage shortfalls, which means constant running calls. And again, everybody on this job is a human being. The firefighters want to be heroes. We want to do everything that we can, but there's a real human cost to this. I mean, especially downtown, which will be specifically impacted when the bomb squad is down. Engine 80, you brought up earlier. Engine 80 was a pilot program that we were really hoping would take off and be implemented, that we would have a chance to sit down with management and members of the city to say, hey, look, peak hours, this is the amount of calls it ran. This is the busiest region in the county. Let's keep these resources here. Last year during cuts, unfortunately, because of the pilot nature of that program, Engine 80 ended up going away. So again, we've consistently lost resources, and the amount of wear and tear on the fire engines, wear and tear on our people, the mental health, actual health, because you are exposed to a lot of sickness and illness when you're out there, sleep-deprived nights, especially in these regions. We are only going to see an increase in that if we decrease the amount of resources and funding that we have based on some of these budget cuts.
Absolutely. And I did the research on what Engine 80 really meant to the community. That's 2,700 calls that will have to be run by someone else. And that was only for 12 hours as a peak load unit. In terms of Engine 201, which the bomb squad will have to cross-staff, when you're on a bomb call, that means 3,600 calls will have to be run by someone else. That's a yearly statistic that's been consistent. You also downtown have a rescue unit. They typically are committed for several hours on very complex rescues.
Yep.
They're out of service in essence downtown. So we are going in the wrong direction, specifically in a high density environment, that being downtown. Downtown was never thought through in terms of a population that lives within the confines of downtown. It was thought of as go to work 8 to 5 and everyone leaves downtown. I was at Station 1 25 years ago, and it was quiet at night. That wasn't what we knew because everyone went home after 5 o'clock. That is not the downtown we know. And since that point in time, we have done nothing but lose resources over these last 25 years. We'd
really like to drill down now on what the human impact of this looks like So joining us now is our Health and Safety Director, Jason Deneau. Jason, would you like to tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do for Local 145 and its members?
Yeah, we're in the same academy, so 20 years on, 66 Academy. Yeah, that's right. So I'm a fire captain at Fire Station 16 in La Jolla. With Local 145, I'm our Health and Safety Director. So really encompasses all things health and safety related to our members, everything from what we're talking about now, sleep deprivation, impacts, cancer rates. We're working on some new issues that we're also facing, but really kind of a big role, anything health and safety.
Very cool. No, you've done an exceptional amount of work. There's been no shortage for you. But as we navigate through this budgetary crisis and shortfall that we're looking at, and now the proposed cuts, as a health and safety representative, what are some of your concerns? Let's talk specifically to operational impacts and the overwork of a lot of our members, and how we can work together to figure out what we can do to make this tenable.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that's really gained a lot of knowledge through research are the impacts of sleep deprivation.
Right.
The public knows we work 24-hour shifts, but due to our staffing shortages, oftentimes that extends into 48 hours, 72 hours. What the science is showing is that sleep deprivation really impacts our members. So there's the impact on the health. They've shown that working these long shifts, not getting much sleep, really causes an impact on your immune system. So we're taking members that through their work are exposed to biological substances, environmental toxins when we respond to fires. And now you're taking that person, and through sleep deprivation, you're reducing their immune response. So it's really kind of a double hit right there. Hence why we see cancer rates that are higher than the general public, neurological disease. But then there's also the impact on how they're able to perform. Scientists did a comparison and tried to say, okay, what does this amount of sleep deprivation equate to in a BAC or someone who's under the influence of alcohol? What they showed is if someone hasn't slept in 18 hours, that's equivalent to a 0.05. So in the state of Utah, you're driving under the influence. You're off at that same sleep deprivation, 18 hours. They looked at the performance, how people were able to respond to different types of tests. And they were responding at a 50% lower rate with 18 hours. Working downtown, getting 6 hours of sleep is actually a decent night. So it's not unheard of to not sleep at all. So in a 24-hour period where you haven't slept at all, that's equivalent to a 0.10, which obviously is above the standard here in the state of California. You're essentially under the influence. So when we start talking about, okay, you're not able to go home, we have, because of our staffing shortage, mandatories. Well, if you get mandatory in between your shifts, now this is turned into a 72-hour work shift. And if you're working downtown, you could count on one hand how many hours of sleep you've gotten over those 72 hours. So the impacts are real, not only in how it's impacting the health of our members, but how they're able to respond. We know we respond to all risk, and some of these incidents require us to be really on top of our game. And when you're operating in that mindset, it can be really detrimental to our performance. And then obviously I said long-term wise, these impacts start to snowball, and over a 30-year career, that's why we're seeing these higher risk of certain diseases.
Wow, that's alarming to think that we've got, just based on the factors of our profession and what we have to do, that we have probably a good percentage of our workforce consistently operating essentially to the equivalent of being under the influence of a substance, which is just, again, I know it kind of comes with the territory, and a lot of us didn't really understand that coming on when you're 22 years old and you want to do this job, and we still love it. It's just you never really think about those kinds of impacts when you actually assign a numerical value to it, or I guess kind of highlighting what you said, that it could be equated to being drunk, essentially.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We've talked about this when we talk to our members. What's really important, we deal with a large population of our workforce that, one, are younger, and two, they don't have a risk aversion, right? They would not have come into this career if they were risk averse. It's just part of the nature. You understand that when you go on these calls, you're putting everything on the line, including your own life. And we take that very seriously. It's something that we're all very proud of. But what we don't realize, what the numbers are showing, it's this cumulative effect of exposures, of not sleeping, that are really in the end probably going to be what kills you. And so we've tried to create this program and awareness and work with the city, and we are making some ground on some issues. Like our cancer awareness prevention program is robust, and we're trying to really educate our members to these risks. But unfortunately, in regard to this issue, we're taking an area that generates the most 911 calls. If you look at downtown and the immediate surrounding areas, and when you remove an engine in an area where engine 80 has already been removed, and then you take 201s, there's those calls have to be answered, and it's going to be on the backs of the engines and the apparatus that are in that area. We can't tell the public, no, we're not going. So, when you take engine 201 out of service for long periods of time, which you discussed with George, because these bomb calls aren't short, right? You've been on them. They can take hours, sometimes days. And so having that apparatus, the idea of cross-staffing sounds like, oh, well, it's no big deal, but there's only one crew. You can't be in two places at one time. So you take these members in an area that's running a lot of calls, and then you're expected to respond to this bomb threat with possibly limited sleep because of the area, and then you're expected to perform, right? Those calls are some of the most high-risk calls that any of our members go on, and now you're operating at 50% of your capability. That's a really scary idea.
100%. And you bring up a good point there, and I would love for you to kind of drill down on this concept for those who don't do what we do. Can you walk us through that chart of high risk, low frequency, and you
Sure.
get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of have what we would call our bread and butter calls, right? About 80% of our calls are medical aids, and they're when we respond to them, it's our citizens' worst day, right? It could be a CPR, it could be their child's choking, their parents are having a heart attack, it could be a car accident. But we do those reps every day. You and I both have 20 years of this. We know how they're going to run. Once in a while, you have a curveball, but we've seen it. So we can do those, what you could say, in our sleep. We've got that down. But then we have calls that we don't respond to very frequently. So it's an infrequent call that we're not getting a lot of exposure to. We try to make up for it through training, but they're low frequency, high risk. So something goes wrong on one of those calls, on a bomb squad call, on a heavy rescue call, and the consequences are severe, not just for ourselves, for our members, but for the citizens themselves. So in the military, in fire service, those are the calls we have to really be careful of because we don't see them that much. But the impacts could be devastating. So you take both heavy rescue and the bomb squad happen to be downtown. Right? So in this case, if you were to remove 201s for any period of time, all of those calls are being absorbed by the surrounding areas, including heavy rescue. Right? If engine 2 is on a call, heavy rescue is going to get that call. So that's another population that we have where low frequency, high risk, and running them more, running the bomb squad more. You're utilizing their ability to really perform proficiently because they're already being spread thin on all the other calls.
So let's shift into another realm that you are responsible for. So we spoke about the level of burnout and how when you do this job, when you see the same tragedy over and over again, you become somewhat immune to it. But I'm going to steal your phrase. It's drops in a bucket, right? Mm-hmm. And eventually you don't know which drop is going to create the overflow. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to being exposed to tragedy, sickness, illness, devastation, all of it, and then you couple in, oh yeah, and by the way, sorry, you're not going home today. And you have to make those phone calls to your husband or your wife. Tell the kids, I won't be at the recital. I won't be at the big Little League game or whatever it is. What have you seen from a health and safety standpoint, the impacts are with that burnout, with the mental health aspect of how we've really been struggling and what some of the top killers are in this profession for our people and how we can address it?
Yeah. So I mentioned, the idea, a lot of the public thinks like, well, when firefighters are dying, they're dying in fires. And unfortunately, we do have that, but numbers have been surpassed. Cancer is now the biggest killer. And we represent Local 145 every year when we go to the International Association of Firefighter Memorial in Colorado and CPF in Sacramento.
Yeah.
And when you sit there
and put too many people on that wall.
We do. And when you see what's killing them, it is cancer. But since 2017, suicide has surpassed people dying in fires across the country. And so when we talk about drops in the bucket, the idea is that like, you have a bucket when you come on, and slowly all the things that we see, the trauma, the exposures, they're just, the human brain becomes at a certain point overwhelmed with all of that. And that bucket will fill up and it starts to spill over. And so what does that mean? It spills over. Well, we have seen, unfortunately, in our own department, we've been touched by suicide. We see increases in substance abuse. We see increases in divorce rates. And we have worked with management to develop a behavioral health program. I can tell you, talking to them, to my partners on that side, that every day they're receiving phone calls from people who are just saying, I've had, my bucket is full, essentially. When we came on, a busy station was 12 to 15 calls. That was getting after it. And I remember when we were both working at Station 1, 15 years ago, it was hitting 20. That's at turnover. You tell the oncoming crew, we hit 20. Like that was a legit busy day. 20's nothing now. 30's become the new 20. So as we're running more and more of these calls, we're being exposed to more and more trauma, those buckets are filling up faster. And so you come into the job, and you're excited and you want to help the public, but all of these things that we're seeing and being exposed to are spilling over into their family life. And then you take, all of those increased call volume, the impacts, and then you add mandatories on top of it, where you're telling your spouse, sorry, I'm not home for our child's birthday. I was mandatory, or, I'm not going to be able to go on this trip. Over time, our significant others, our spouses, are already doing a lot because we're not there for at least 12 days of the month. When you add on 3 or 4 more days, it becomes a heavy burden. And that's why we see such high rates of divorce. And, unfortunately for some of our members, they turn to substance abuse. So that creates additional issues. So it really can magnify these issues over time and impact from all different sides.
No, those are great points. And, again, I stand by this with 100% certainty. The men and women that do this job, particularly here, they aspire to be heroic and will do whatever it takes and put themselves in harm's way. And I just have so much admiration for a lot of these individuals who choose to do this. But we're human beings. Everybody has a breaking point. And I think that the drops in the bucket analogy is so appropriate. It's so good. And it brings us back to how this department, as big as it is, it's had its struggles. Our entire professional life here, it's been a struggle. And circling back to these cuts, so many drops in the bucket and losing these positions, although some people may think, oh yeah, no big deal. These are drops in the bucket. These are positions that devastatingly impact certain people's lives. People have built their lives around some of these positions that they've aspired to, right? And the impact's there. And then to your point, the impact operationally that the bomb squad being on calls or not being able to respond will have on the surrounding crews drops in the bucket, right? Oh God, yet another thing that we're trying to endure. Mm-hmm. But again, I really do appreciate you bringing those issues to light. I think a lot of times when it comes to first responders, people in emergency services, it's almost like the perception is very similar to folks in the military, where it's like, oh, they're soldiers, they can handle it, and we can. But we're human beings, and we do have our vulnerabilities, and we do have, these buckets that we try to manage. Mm-hmm. So just any final thoughts on the health and safety impacts of these budget cuts, or just in general, things that you think would be useful for a random everyday citizen to know about us?
Yeah, I think, an analogy for what we're talking about with the bomb squad, I think most people can relate to is comparing it to medicine. Our bomb technicians and our rescue technicians are essentially our neurosurgeons, right? They are highly specialized. They go to low frequency, high risk calls. The idea that they only respond to 150 calls a year, it may sound low to the public, but those are high risk calls that require high specialty. So there are neurosurgeons, and essentially what's happening now is the department saying, hey, we need you to work in the ER, right? So go pick up an ER shift. You're going to be high nonstop action. You're probably not going to get much rest, but you're still going to work as a neurosurgeon. So now you've spent 16 hours working the ER and like, hey, we've got a complex neurosurgery case that just came up. Go into OR now perform at your best. It's not going to happen. So I think that the public needs to know that we're trying to create a space so that these members are showing up on these specialty calls at their best, and they're able to perform not just for their own health, but for the health of citizens and everyone around them. In regard to other issues, unfortunately, as we're facing these budget cuts or deficits in our personnel, on the other side, we're seeing like these needs that are coming up in health and safety. So as we've moved through time, we're seeing the calls that our everyday members responding to increase. So, for example, lithium-ion fires, right? Our members are responding to more lithium-ion fires than they ever have.
Yeah.
Scooters, cars, batteries, and that's not at risk to our members. They have shown that as these heavy metals aerosolize, there's not just a component to affecting their lungs and cancer rates, but there's also, it impacts the brain. So unfortunately, our department has seen, we have a member who is battling with Parkinson's right now. And across the nation, we're seeing increases in neurologic disease. It's because we're responding to more and more of these fires. We're exposed to diesel exhaust. We're exposed to more environmental toxins that are associated with causing cancer, but we're realizing that, these are actually increasing neurological disease too. So how does that equate to money? Well, we think that having a robust blood testing program that you can go to after being exposed to one of these fires is great. We can track the health of these members over time after they've had these exposures and catch things before they get too sick. We're dealing with PFAS in our turnouts, right? This forever chemical that we've realized reduces our immune system that we wear every day. It does a great job at repelling oil and water, but it also comes at a cost, right? And it reduces our immune system response. So we can see increased rates in disease. That's going to cost a lot of money. How do we replace this over time? We have, as you mentioned, the majority of our fire stations are over 50 years old. There's the amount of money that we need to commit to making sure that these places, when our members get back from responding to incidents, fires, medical aids, that they're going back to a place where it's restoration, not a continued exposure, whether it be dust, mold, anything else like that. So there are these things, these needs that are coming up that unfortunately we're hoping to expand, right? So we're hoping, hey, let's put some money towards these things for our own health and safety. And we see it's going the opposite direction. So obviously, first and foremost, we've got to make sure that we're doing our job. But we're realizing that when we're in this state, like it's taking away from other things that are needed in our health and safety program.
No, that's a great point. Ultimately, public safety has to be a priority. But what comes with that means making sure that we have the ability to do our jobs and have the resources necessary to do it safely and for a long time, right? Because this is a 30-year career. Mm-hmm. That being said, Jason, it's been enlightening. I really appreciate the insight and the knowledge that you bring to this position, the passion. You fight for the members every single day. And the information, I think, is going to be very useful to the layperson to kind of have a more general understanding of what it is that we do and the environments that we work in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.